Good afternoon, good evening, anyone watching now or listening later to the audio podcast version. It is an absolute pleasure to be joined by past guests of the show uh, to talk about board games, both experienced in that field. Uh, in no particular order, John, welcome back. If you could introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, sure. My name's John Houlihan. I'm a British sci-fi and fantasy author, game designer, and line editor for Modiphius on the Acton Cthulhu RPG, amongst a few other things.
Fantastic. And Joseph, please.
Yeah, I'm Joseph Oliveira from Afterlight Comics. I started up Afterlight Comics, horror comics publisher in the UK. We've uh, made dozens and dozens of horror comics and crowdfunded over 50 campaigns on there over the last couple of years. And yeah, I write some of them as well as publish other people's works. And now going into board games as well.
Fantastic. So both of you started as writers, and at some point, I'm assuming you took the plunge of the jump into board game design. So obviously, very different things. But John, how does it differ writing? Because how did you design a board game? Well, like, what's the first step?
Well, I think it all begins probably with just the basic idea. This is I don't know, for example, a haunted house game, or where it's a race to do this, or a race to Mars, or I think it all starts from a basic idea, and then if the kernel of that great idea is there, it's just a case of trying to translate that into fun and interesting mechanics. I mean, they say good game design is a series of interesting choices for the players. I suppose that's never a bad place to start, really. But yeah, start with a fun idea or scenario that you have always wanted to explore, and then see how that can be kind of expressed in a game, in a board game.
Because Joseph, like I know you launched what was the game called? Battle of the Crypt. Survive the Cryptid.
Into the Cryptids, yeah.
That's right. And that also, not having seen it, but knowing a little bit about your work, there seems to also be a story in that game, much like there are in your comics, isn't it?
Yeah, so obviously I've done a few cryptid comics and done a lot of folklore horror comics. For me, my gateway into board games was kind of using something that I think would appeal, because it was completely new for me. I'm coming from a comics creation background. What would have like a smoother transition from people that like the comics to the board games as well, and not just like completely dry and something completely new and different where, I can't access some of that audience to help support, the board game. But also, something that I'm interested as well in the cryptids and the horror aspect as well. I'm doing something that was, because I was a complete noob to board games, 2 years ago. I'm all about something that's easy to pick up, can learn in a couple of minutes, not have like a dead thick rule book where you're sitting around with friends and, oh, this is how you do this, and then referring, stopping the gameplay, stopping the fluidity of a game to read rule 33.4 on a certain page, and so that it was like a mashup. But I think maybe John can agree where you take a few mechanics from few different board games that you really enjoy, and try and work it in your own unique way. And mine was like, I love like choose your own adventure aspects, so I included that into some of the cards. So you make choices as a group as you go through the tombs. Do you pick up this and then you're rewarded, or you're punished? So those aspects, and also like replayability with this like shuffling aspect. So every game is different. And also co-op as well. It's a co-op survival horror board game, so you've got that kind of, you're in it together. You're not battling out against each other. You're making decisions as groups. So yeah, for me, who was completely new to it, I was trying to play on my strengths of what I know, using my writing from horror comics, with the choose your own adventure element, writing them on cards, and coming up with like multiple paths, like a video game, or a choose your own adventure book.
That sounds really cool.
It's playing to your strengths, basically. I think that's what I've always tried and done in the creative space. Not trying something new, but also playing to your strengths. That makes sense.
And John, is there a little bit like writing where you could have tried to keep your first game, like Joseph said, a bit more basic before coming up with like these grandiose, some board games you would know are almost tabletop versions of an RPG with, complex rule sets?
Well, I think it's like everything. It's matching the design to the audience. Some people absolutely love that really crunchy, I've got to learn a 50-page rule book before. I'm not one of them, I've got to confess. But some people really do love going into that depth and, getting every nuance and studying and all that kind of thing. I think, you kind of, I'm definitely with Joseph on this one. I like stuff that maybe not so simple, but that stuff that you can learn as you play a lot as you go. I think that's a really good kind of thing. I mean, most of the time, the first time you play a board game, you're going to be sort of learning it on you a bit. But I think you want to make the barriers to entry really, really small. Like just, ideally you can pick it up, read a minute's worth of text, and off you go, and then you learn it as you play together. And I also, I really agree. I love co-op. I'm a bit over adversarial games now. Maybe it was all those games of Monopoly in our youth when one person would walk away with it, everyone would hate and resent them for the rest of the day, right?
I mean, this is what I was telling you both before going live. This is my childhood irrational fear. I was terrified of board games because it wasn't so much the fear of losing, but like the fear of being mocked for losing after. And I was so like shying away, running away from board games, that when I found RPGs, it was like, this is my thing. Everyone working together, like, this is what I really, and I just fell down that rabbit hole.
There are a lot more co-op, I think, there's a lot more co-op games by nature nowadays. I think there was I think it was out of Germany. I'm not really a big historian or anything, but there was a bit of a movement that came out of Germany with things like Catan and things like this, for a sort of more gentler cooperative experience where it was you guys against the game. And I think that's what I think is where board games are at their best, to try and win you over here, Jose, is that, you get a bunch of your friends and you all sit down together and you kind of cooperate and you work out the best way to sort of beat the game or win with, your friends on board, rather than knives at each other's throats and the last man standing or last woman.
Yeah. I've just got here in the chat, it's a not so old, but it's an old friend of mine. We used to work together. Now he runs a guest house in Bucharest, I think, if he's still there. And he runs game nights every Sunday there. Basically, finds it difficult to get people to commit to longer games.
Yeah, well, that's the thing nowadays. Everyone's really super time poor, aren't they? And, much as like when I was at college, we used to play Kingmaker for 8 hours at night. You would spend a whole day doing it. I mean, no one's got time to do that now, have they?
Yeah.
You really don't want it to be more than 2 hours for a complex game, I reckon, is more than enough.
Yeah. There was a D&D session on YouTube that went viral, wasn't there? 40 years. It's gone on for 40 years.
Well, I mean, and this is what I found. Like, I've got 2 young kids. They are 9 and 6. And kids these days, they could spend hours and hours on their tablets. Joseph, you're about to find this out. So I tried to get some board games going, but I'm trying to find the right board game. So I got the re-edition of Hero Quest, which is a much better quality than the one in the 80s. But it gets to a point where those adventures are a bit too long, particularly for my young one, to stay. He likes the fact that he's moving the pieces around the board, and then you got the different monsters, and I kind of narrate the encounters, but he doesn't have the attention span to stick for a whole scenario there. So maybe something similar, but a bit sort of, 40-minute game would be ideal for that. So maybe, Joseph, I need to pick a copy of Survive the Cryptids when I'm in London next. But what is... So I'll start with Joseph. So you've got the idea for the game, right? What is that first draft look like? Like, did you just use paper and just tile it out and just like really basic stuff to do like a first test of play? How does that work?
Yeah, so well, I cheated a bit. Like as I say, I like to play to my strengths. I'm completely new to board games, but I knew what I kind of liked in a board game. Like I said, like the replayability, the accessibility to it, but also a challenge, and then make it quite thematic as well with the story and the narrative. So I actually hired a board game designer and told them what I liked, what I wanted. And paid them as a freelancer to work on the rule book, and then that would give me like the foundations, and then I'd work from there, and then play test it myself, and then apply all the results and the multipliers and things like that, and obviously iron out things that kept cropping up. Obviously, when he made the rule book, it wasn't 100%, or this can go to shops now. There was a lot of work to be done, and I've done that obviously via playtesting and playtest places that go into conventions and things like that. So yeah, it was basically what I enjoy, and again, those three main points for me: the replayability, accessibility, and those bits and pieces. So if I was recommending things to someone, if you've not got a lot of time, hire someone. But if you have got a lot of time and you've got experience in board games, you could obviously take those that experience that you've got and put it into practice. And like I say, write what you know and what you play, and in those experiences, but obviously make it different enough so it's not like a copy of something. It's that's something already being done 10 times.
But
awesome. Yeah.
But the first time when you initially play tested the game, did you just have like rough version of the cards, a rough version of the board? It wasn't quite the finished product, I'm assuming. You didn't have
Yeah. I've got the printed like tiles that were about an eighth of the size of the actual tiles, and just used what I've obviously bought a few board games for experience and get my board game knowledge up a bit. So I actually use some of the pieces from those board games as well. Obviously the dice, the figurines as well, some of the tokens, the coins and things like that really helped that way. And yeah, so just really cheap. You can also I would print off like I said, the choose your own adventure kind of questions and stuff. I print them off and then slice them with like scissors or whichever I've got. And yeah, really bare bones. I really recommend not like getting a prototype your first prototype out, based on that first playthrough. Just keep ironing out the bits and the pieces and the first few play runs before you get to like a test prototype, because you might find whilst you're playing that prototype, you find out like a game breaking bug or something like that, and you've got to scrap it and do something a bit different. So yeah, I did a few play runs of just a bit of card and a bit of paper myself.
I can see John nodding there all the time, like a stupid question I'm assuming here because I don't know anything. Like, how many hours of play testing do you have to do before you consider you've figured everything out, all the possible cracks in the game?
Still figure it out.
I don't think it ever ends, does it?
It's not like board games. It's not like video games. We can't just release a patch when everyone's got it either. We have to update the rule book or something.
I mean, just to echo what Joseph said, when I first start doing a game, it's like, I'll be sellotaping bits of paper together, using, using the printer to print out dummy cards. I've got like a whole bag full of generic meeples. You've got dice from other stuff, and it's a real, you don't obviously know art or anything. You've just got all the basic stuff that you need to, test that first set of rules that you come up with. And then again, echoing Joseph, it's a very iterative process. You get that thing and you think, oh, this is probably how it's going to, start off with. And then, of course, you throw it in front of a bunch of players and they break it immediately, usually in some ways. Or they find ways to, inventive ways to cheese through things that you hadn't actually, taken account of. They just, and all that kind of thing. And you just keep going and you keep going and you keep going. And, you make these prototypes out of card and paper and all that kind of thing. Test them and then test them again. And then, how long, it takes is how long is a piece of string. Shorter games, I think, obviously, you can, it's shorter time development. But, you want to get it in front of as many people as possible, I think.
So I was at UK Games Expo in was it Birmingham last year, and with the prototype, and it was really difficult because it's your baby and you're taking it to the first time and it's being passed around and everything.
How dare you criticise my board game?
But honest to God, it is so difficult because obviously being from a complete newbie board game background, you're obviously coming across people that can be new to board games too, intermediate, and also heavily experienced, play board games day in, day out, and they're coming to play my debut board game. That's a big test.
Yeah, that's right.
You try not to take things to heart and die a little inside when they rip something or but I learned so much. You just got to take it on the chin and knew this wasn't going to be the final thing. Look, I've got to accept things as they are. If I want this to be successful, it's really important to listen to the feedback, constructively, and move forward with that and implement it into future editions. Like John, you never truly feel like you're finished, kind of thing. There's always going to be people that aren't going to like it, for sure. You've got to find your audience though, and there's that audience for it, I believe.
Well, that's it, isn't it? No game is going to appeal to everyone, right? So you've just got to go for the best. Where we started, the best thing is going to be something I think that I want to play and my friends want to play. Stuff that I like, Cthulhu Mythos or military or sci-fi, fantasy. I got quite broad taste, but it's almost impossible to design a game that is going to be good for newbies and good for veterans as well. They're two opposing things. So again, you've got to kind of think, who do I want to play this? Who's going to be the audience for this?
That's why it was important as well. Like at the convention, having that level head. When you could tell the really experienced board game players were coming in. They were suggesting things like this, that, and the other. But then, I'm thinking to myself, I want this to be accessible and be able to be picked up and played, and things that's kind of suggesting changes that. It doesn't become that pick up and play. It becomes
overly complex, right?
It's a balance. It's a balance.
Yeah. I think the other thing, one interesting thing I think about, it's a video game thing. I can't quite remember who came up with it. It might even be id Software. It was 10 minutes of fun or 15 minutes of fun. And, I think that's a great philosophy for board games. Half an hour of fun or an hour of fun with my friends or against my friends or whatever. I think that's a good thing because, that is one limiting factor, isn't it, that everyone has is time. Can I have a great game in 15 minutes or can I have 4 games in an hour or can I have 1 game in an hour or 1 game in 2 hours? That's quite an interesting sort of way of looking at things because it's a board game, like anything else, is an entertainment experience, isn't it? We're in the entertainment business after all, and you want, it's even with your babies, you want people to just go out there and have fun with it, and think, great, no, I can't wait to play X, Y, Z, whatever it is, with my friends.
What was that first moment when you show it to like people that haven't been involved in the process? So Joseph, you were talking about being at the Games Expo. Like, do you play with them to guide, or do you just give them the game and sit there watching and biting your nails?
Yeah, it was a bit of both, to be honest, Jose. It was because it can be played solo as well. So it's a solo. So basically, it can be played solo or co-op, up to 4 players, and it has like different levels of difficulty. So solo, I recommend easy-ish, and then when you've got a few more players, you've got medium, and then you've got hard, and you determine that those levels by the more tiles that you introduce, because every tile you flip over, you encounter like this folklore cryptid that you have to battle. So when, like, say a single person came up to the table, which was like the very first person that came to the table on the first Friday, I thought I'd play with him. So it was just me and him. But then when you got like a group of 4 or 3, I just sat back and just let them go. That's where the real test was, like I gave like 5-minute, 6-minute tutorial, and then people were just like picking it up and just going and just flowing with it, which was like, really big thing for me, because that's what I really wanted, to be able to people to pick up and play and just, flow through it and see them go through the rhythms of the game. That was really really good and really, helpful to see that it works. You can only do so much at home, but once you see like it happening, it's like magic.
Nice.
I had a question here from the chat that, whether you agree or disagree, that from a business side, to generate sales, it has to appeal to a wider audience and therefore a less complex. Sorry, unless so you should have a less complex game unless the premise is already into the consumer psyche. I've completely butchered that question, but hopefully, I think I made the point.
I think I know what they mean. Yeah, so they're saying like to get a mass market game, you need it to be quite
simple
and accessible.
Yeah,
and that is true to it. I think that is probably true to an extent, but it's hard, isn't it? Because I think a board game is quite a unique marriage of art, science, and economics. Right? You've got the art of creating it and wanting to make this game, which is your vision and your thing. You've got the sort of science, which is the mechanics and how that's all done, and then you've got the economics, and that is, again, what is the audience for this game? How many am I going to print, and can I sell them, distribute and sell them? And that is, that's moving it sort of a bit away from what I care to do, because I'm not really on that side of thing. But it's a growing, it has to be a serious concern, because I don't know where you had your final game made, Joseph, but most of them are probably made out in China. And therefore you have to think about things like logistics. You have to be able to think, where am I going to distribute it? Where am I going to sell it? What is the economics of making it? How much does a unit of this thing cost? Now, just going back to the question, right? It's a thing, right? An RPG is printing a book and making some dice, but a board game is it's art, science, and economics, all of those things. Whether it has to be simple to be a mass market game, I don't know. I think that Monopoly is not that simple. If you ask me, it's quite complex. It's very, it's probably one of the most enduring sellers. But I think you can, I don't think you have. I think you can, again, think about your audience. You don't have to sell millions to make a successful game. You need to find an audience of 5,000 people who will buy that game, and that will be a success for you if you get the economics right.
Mm-hmm. I think it has to hit a lot of points, doesn't it? I think it has to hit the appeal. What's the audience? What's the themes? The artwork is obviously a big thing now as well.
Yeah.
Some people buy board games just for miniatures. If
Oh yeah,
miniatures,
absolutely.
you know, they'll buy the miniatures and fob off the board game. You know, I made the decision to include miniatures for the Cryptid board game as well, and that introduces new challenges and things like that. Having all the figures 3D designed by a artist, and then obviously tallying that up into the unit costs of the board game as well moving forward. But yeah, you look at games like Arkham Horror, you know, that's quite a complex game, and that's, you know, one of the most popular board games in the world, really, isn't it?
Sure.
I bought that off Amazon to just have a go, and I opened the box and bought a gazillion pieces, and I was like, I put it back in the box. I was like, I do not have time to assemble this and play it with my wife. You know, it's gonna give up. You know,
I bought that game because I just love the whole Cthulhu thing, and just to introduce my wife, because I thought the RPG would be too geeky for her, but the board game version would be. And we set it all up. I had read the instruction manual twice. I said, "Yeah, we're good to go." We started playing, and my wife was like, "Nah, find a video somewhere. This is not working. It is a complicated game."
Yeah. But it's a successful game, you know. There's definitely markets for, like John said at the beginning, there's markets for people that want the more lore and the big thick books, and I totally appreciate that, and I'd love to do it myself, but I just like a lot of people just don't have time to get invested in the hours that you need to spend in a night. Sometimes we only have an hour, bit of 1 hour free time if we're lucky of an evening, you know, with family things, you know, to spend. So yeah.
And you mentioned something that just made me think, like someone thinking, venturing into board game design, like you talk about miniatures, it seems to be like a much more collective effort that you would think in the first place, isn't it? Because if you wouldn't, well, I suppose you could buy meeples. There's like generic board game material shops out there. But if you want to have custom made miniatures for your game, and that just seems, to me, it just seems overly complicated. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Would you recommend someone go there, or keep it simple with cards and token printed figures?
I'd recommend keeping it simple and keeping it, you know, going against my own advice. But for the cryptids, for this cryptid board game, I thought there's such a big fan base of cryptids. You've got like the Mothman, you've got Bigfoot, you know, you've got Chupacabra and all these real Loch Ness. You've got all these creatures that people love, and having, like I said before, people would just buy that for the miniatures as well, to have them in the collection. You know, I had people messaging me saying that. So
is that a compliment or?
I'll take anything. If you're going to buy it, I'll take it. And you know, the part of the board game is like, it's like a final boss in the board game, so it's got like that nice final piece finish, you know, at the end to do it. So I think because it's, people know what they are, those kind of folklore creatures. I think you do, you know, it's a good thing to do, but for like, you know, a standard game, and it's not really part of the theme of the game, and you're just doing it to, I don't know, maybe add a few bells and whistles when it's not completely necessary, I'd opt against it, because it's like to have those cryptids 3D prototyped by an artist, you know, full, you know, 360 degree, and you know, it's a lot of work, and it's expensive work, and also adds to your unit cost. When you come into, you know, to producing the board game, you know, you've got to bake that into your costs down the line. And obviously, if you're doing heavier things, the weight always contributes. If you're doing maybe chrome miniatures or extra special ones, you know, you got to factor those in.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're starting, probably it's not super necessary to have it, unless, like, you know, I mean, Joseph, it sounds like it's, you know, they're absolutely an integral part of the game and really, really add to the appeal for people. So again, it's a sort of probably a case by case basis. Not super necessary to design a board game, but if your theme is monsters and, you know, or the Cthulhu mythos, and you know, you want to plonk down a big mini of Cthulhu right in the middle of the board as a dramatic finale, then hey, you know, that's great. But again, can you afford it? Does it? what does it add to the game appeal wise compared to what does it cost to produce? And you're right, it's not cheap, is it? Like to get 3D artists to do it. I mean, they are, fair play to them. They are proper artists. These guys are brilliant. Produce some amazing minis. So, that has to be paid for, really.
It seems to me, listening to both of you, this is obviously very different from writing, publishing your books or your comics, but it seems almost like you're getting an on-the-job business administration degree in the whole process of writing, designing, marketing, producing the game, isn't it? Much more than it is with writing. You've both done both, so I don't know. I'll take your word for it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think, as I say, it really is a combination of those things. It's more complex than producing a novel, for example. For me, when I write a book, the hard work is writing the book for me, or the time it takes, and then I've got a layout guy and a cover artist, and that's probably pretty much the core team. Obviously, the marketing and all that comes on top, which I do. But it's quite a very small team. Whereas if you're producing quite a complex board game, you've got the designers. You're going to have that play testers, pro play testers. Sometimes there's art, there's component design, there's 3D design. It's a real project.
Marketing,
yeah. And then you've got once you've made it, that's the easy bit in some senses. Then you've got to sell it. You've got to distribute it.
So let's talk a little bit about that then. So you've had your idea, amazingly, you found a designer to do your minis, you managed to get them made somewhere in the Far East. You got everything sorted. How does marketing, promoting a board game differ from books? I mean, you mentioned going to Games Expo in Birmingham. I just recently learned that the biggest board game convention in the world is in Hessen, which I think is that my geography is failing me here, so public shaming. Is that Germany or right? Okay.
I should spiel.
How's that?
I've not been to that one, not yet. Have you, John?
No, I haven't. I'm shockingly bad at getting to shows, I'm afraid. Please.
When obviously the board game's published, and when I've got it in hands, it's something. If one of the biggest conventions in the world, and it's only in Europe, I'm gonna obviously try and get over there. But close behind it is the UK Board Games Expo in Birmingham, and there's a few smaller ones in the UK, but that one in Germany is definitely a big dog one. I aim to get to at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's all the conventional ways, advertising and stuff. I think you'll probably agree, Joseph, some of the best marketing is done at these kind of conventions where you just demo it to people and they go, oh, okay, that's quite interesting. I'll sign up for your list, or or put me down for a copy, even if you're very lucky. So there is, and I think one nice thing about the board game community is that there's a lot of word of mouth. So you can go along and demo it at game shops, and people can play it, and they'll say, oh, they'll communicate to their friends, say, oh, we've played this amazing game. You can do a lot of things with a kind of let's play on YouTube. Again, you've got to obviously get people to watch that somehow. But you can demo it really nicely and concisely in video, just like people demo RPGs on YouTube nowadays. So I think that it's not that marketing is easy, but there's an audience out there, and if you can get and show them what you've done and they like it, they'll be receptive to it. I think, which is really nice. I think board games are they're quite a nice community. They generally do it for the love of the hobby and stuff. So they're open to seeing new things. In fact, the big gag is like, and you probably haven't really got a wall of shame there, but board gamers, they tend to have like a whole wall of board games, and they probably regularly play about 4 or 5 of them. And there'll be ones that are sat there that have been bought and just not opened or played yet.
Yeah.
They're bought and want, they love the idea of it. Again, it's just getting time to play it, isn't it? And play it.
And does it work like publishing, where, I mean, obviously, Joseph, you are producing and you're marketing and distributing the game yourself, but can it be the case that it gets picked up by a publisher and you license or sell them? I mean, I don't know how that works. Is that a thing?
So I did two card games previous to the board game called Clash of the Cryptids and Clash of the Yokai. They're both similar, but just more different themes, yokai and cryptids. And when that was published, I had a publisher in America, reach out wanting to license it, and I get so many dollars per copy that they want to print. So there was that. So yeah, it's definitely an option, where if you do publish, there's other creators, publishers that could take on your work that's got a larger distribution network, connections with board game shops that will get you into board game shops. They've got good connections and can fulfill. And that, they have that at most of these board game conventions. You can just take a prototype of your game and, ship it around. Publishers that are actively just there to publish. The one in Germany is a big one of that, I believe. And you can make meetings and stuff like that. Yeah, my board game in September actually failed to fund. I didn't know if you knew that or not.
I saw that, yeah.
So it's not officially published yet. So I'm still actively looking to try and publish it and fund it myself. But again, like the marketing of it was, I think the time of launch was not very good. Little did I know that it was around the US election time. And I was working with Backer Ads, and they just weren't getting their ROS on the ads that we were spending, because America was spending that much money on adverts for the
campaigns.
It was just getting swallowed up. Yeah.
No.
So that 5 months of build up from earlier in the year to then touring at board game conventions, getting the sign-ups and things like that. It was pretty gutting to that first day, that's not seeing it, tick up too far. And it had 500 pre-launch followers. I thought it was in good standing. But what I've learned, I've learned a lot since then, speaking with consultants now since then, processing things. Like the conversion rate of your pre-launch followers for campaign pages is like 2 to 5%, where I've come from comics, the conversion has always been around 20 to 25%. So I was thinking I had that good follower rate, I'm going to have a good conversion. But again, you got to pick yourself up and learn from all the experiences that I'm obviously learning in this new territory, and it's all brand new to me still. So yeah.
That's such a shame for you, fella. I really feel for you on that.
Oh yeah,
it's overtaken by, just overtaken by events. But it is tough. That's what I guess what people perhaps don't realise is that the amount of blood, sweat, and tears that go into that box you get at the end. I'm pretty lucky in that. I work for Modifius, who do a lot of this stuff, and they do publish other people's games as well. And there's some real talent out there, and the industry. I'm sure you'll find a place, Joseph. I'm sure you will. But I want to play the game, so you have to hook me up with the prototype.
Yeah. And another thing about that September was it apparently the most launched board games Kickstarter. Oh, no. 500 or 600 board games live at that very moment.
So, can I ask, did you do Kickstarter or?
What's that? Sorry.
Were you doing Kickstarter with
Kickstarter? Yeah, Kickstarter is my main place because I've done like 50 odd Kickstarters of the comics and other comics. Okay. So I've got a lot of followers and things like that. So I thought, again, play to the strength.
Utilize those and stuff. I think that's the other thing as well is. I'm not surprised to hear those figures because it is quite competitive, and there's a lot of people with great ideas and great games out there, but there is sadly, not an unlimited audience. So you really have to kind of, I don't know, find your niche, get lucky. I don't know what you'd say. Sometimes just the stars align, don't they, to bring in millions for one game, whereas another one just doesn't quite, get over the line.
Yeah, who would have thought that the U.S. election will have an impact? It's these things you only learn by doing, isn't it? And just being there and trying. Otherwise, how could you stay at home and think about it and come up with
4 years' time? We should design a U.S. election game. Just have it hit around then.
Yeah. So John, you mentioned about it being competitive. So in your experience, because you are in both fields, what's harder, to get a board game launched successfully, or to get a book, or I don't know, or is it just two things that don't bear comparison?
I don't know. I would think it would be. I think it's probably harder to get a board game launched. I really, as I was saying earlier, like books are, I wouldn't say they're easy, but they're a bit more straightforward because they're, you can do it with a smaller team. With a fiction book, you need one illustration for the cover. It needs to be a good one, obviously, but for a successful board game or an RPG, even you need a decent art budget nowadays, because that is the first way people interact with your brand or your product, and it needs to grab their attention. It needs to tell a story. It needs to kind of encapsulate it, and you need, a lot of people, I think, back games based on their great art, and rightly so, without even thinking what's the game like. But it's that visual thing, and that needs to be paid for. And I think, again, like, no one really play tests I do have a readers group for my novels, and I take feedback from them, but it's not quite such an iterative process. You don't go through, dozens and dozens of iterations of play testing and all that kind of thing. So I would personally think it would be much more challenging to get a board game like greenlit and out there and successful than a book. I'll let you know if I ever do either.
And I was just thinking here, like my experience when I bought that reissue of Hero Quest, and then I was comparing the box that I've got with photos online from the version from the late 80s, early 90s, and I can see the quality of the pieces is better, the design is better. Is it that with time people have got more disposable income for entertainment, and are they demanding higher quality content in the board games?
I think probably in the, I think there's a certain nostalgia element coming into play, certainly with like Hero Quest and things like that. And, probably you might say that perhaps what we think of traditional board games are hitting an older audience. I don't know if that's a fair thing, but I can certainly say people of my generation, who are in my mid-50s now, they're going to be more affluent, aren't they? And have the time perhaps to invest in, and the money to invest in, 100 quid board games, which they, some 150 quid board games, some of them seem to be now, whereas perhaps younger people just get 150 quid from board game. They're not going to think it. I mean, I don't know. You see all kinds of people down at. There's a local cafe, board game cafe in Watford where I live, and you see people playing all sorts of stuff. Young people, old people, and it's quite nice because you don't have to, make that big investment. You can just go down, buy a couple of coffees, take one of the games off the wall, and start playing. But yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know really. Is the answer. Probably.
Well, I suppose is there another segment of the market that maybe wasn't there 40 years ago? Like you say, people like me who have got this nostalgia from the games of the childhood, and they just want to buy a better, improved version of that game.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that definitely is a niche, because I see multiple games. There was Hero Quest. I saw something called Kingmaker, which I used to play when I was back in college, which is 35 years ago now. Oh, I think geeky culture has got certainly a bit wider and a bit more accepted. When we were playing, this was when I first started playing. This was a very niche industry of geeky men. Who who had this little spotty hobby who would devote a lot of time to it. But I think, thankfully, the audience is a lot wider in terms of gender, age, and all that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's a great development, really. I mean, I see. I know a few people in their 20s who love things like Exploding Kittens and those sort of more casual experiences. So, I think it's quite a diverse audience nowadays, and the successful board games will target one particular bit of that audience, maybe.
Okay. No, yeah. And so, Joseph, you obviously haven't given up on getting the game going. And what's your horizon now?
My what? Sorry.
What's your horizon now? What's your plan for
plan? So I'm using another consultant to help me through the process, and also restructure the re-strategize moving forward, and also looking at the price as well, trying to make that maybe a bit more appealing, where it's more on the more on the premium side, and if I want it to be more on the pick up and play side, maybe pair that with something that's more of a pick up and play price. Like I can got that bit of money to spend on something I'm want to give a go. And just looking at things, increasing that follower count as well, that I wanted to now I know the conversion rate's a little lower moving forward. Check there's no US elections on or elections on whatsoever, maybe a good strategy as well. But just looking at finer details of things and trying to polish things a bit more. But as far as the board game goes, it's finished, it's complete. Apart from a few little things I need to change, but the art is the thing is with this is I've fully invested in the game. I've paid for all the artwork. There's 150 different cards with all different unique art on. There's like different scenes. There's all cryptid creatures, illustrations. The box art is done. The prototypes for the miniatures are done. Basically, if I fund, all I need to do is send it to print, basically. And that's that's why I launched on Kickstarter, because I've done so many Kickstarters. I think sometimes people that are going to back up a board game on Kickstarter, they're looking at like the price point and also looking at if they've done campaign before. They've raised 200 grand. Are they gonna some campaigns they've never fulfilled, or 5 years down the line they've not fulfilled? But I've fulfilled 50 campaigns on Kickstarter. Some of them, most of them are comics and graphic novels, but some of them are card games as well. And just like all of them, I've invested in them and they're ready to go and ready to get into people's hands ASAP. The only thing I'd have to wait on is the shipping from abroad. But everything, I do all the card design. I set them all up for print, just like I do the comics and the rule books and all those things. So I can control all of that and the pace and deadlines of things. So I know where I'm at all times with it. So it's literally just a matter of getting the funding for it and just getting it into people's hands.
Yeah. So you're deeply committed to this. So my final question. So John, maybe Joseph, you as well. When you're writing a comic or a novel, do you know that at some point you're gonna get the scissors and cut out? Maybe the story isn't quite going anywhere or isn't working. And anyone that has ever written something, you know how much it pains us to get the scissors out and chop off a chapter or even a paragraph, right? But John, have you been to the point where you go, actually, this game it's just not working. This idea is not really going to come to fruition.
Well, I think you can. Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly you can have some ideas. You can have an idea and you think it's a really solid idea. As I say, like I always think with any project, I always try and like encapsulate it in a couple of sentences, so I can explain what it is to you in a sentence, right? So it's it's a board game where aliens chase you through a derelict spaceship, something like something simple like that. And I think sometimes you think, oh yeah, that would be a great idea, but then when you look into the mechanics of it, you do a bit of development work on it. Sometimes you might even get to a sort of prototype stage, and then you kind of go, well, this just isn't working. So you have to kill your darlings, put it to one side, shoot it in the head, and move on to the next one.
Wow.
No, it's not quite that bad, but I think, you can. Yeah, I think you've got to be kind of quite ruthless in what you put your energies into, because we only all have so much time. And so, if you're going to make something, it's got to, and a board game is a commitment of hundreds of hours. Let's not beat around the bush, if not more. And that is quite a serious project. So if you're going to commit to that, you've got to be pretty sure it's viable.
So have you been in that situation where you had to cock the
Not-
revolver and close your eyes?
Really, well, not really, but not really like with too much development. So I, maybe I've had an idea and then I've sort of done a little bit of research into it and thought that is probably, it might work, but it'd just be too difficult, or I don't have time to put the work in to actually bring that to life. It's more of those rather than taking it out around the back and shooting it. But but yeah, you've got to be quite ruthless in what you devote your time to, because there's only so many hours in the day. Sadly.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I think I just want to leave it here. I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. I've learned a lot because I didn't have a clue about board games. But before we go, Joseph, where can people find you and your work and what you're up to?
Yeah, you can go on www.afterlightcomics.com. You'll find all our comics, digital editions, also the card games I've spoken about, and also there's a newsletter you can sign up to and find more about the upcoming board game in the future.
Fantastic. And John, where can people find you and all the work that you do?
You can probably, best place is johnhoulihan.net, and that's john-houlihan.net. That's my blog and sort of website and stuff. So what I'm up to, you can usually find out there.
Fantastic. Well, and thank you to everyone that was here on the chat before, Rob and Joe and anyone else that is listening later. Thank you, everyone. Take lots of care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.